Good afternoon, everybody. I'm forecaster Andrew Fleck for Analyst Weathercast on your Tuesday afternoon. And we are going to talk about a bit of a situation that's going to try to erupt by early next week. And in this normal time frame, we would still be talking about snow if it was cold enough. But instead, there's going to be more warmer air and some moisture from the Atlantic and Gulf that might just set this up to be not a big snowstorm, but rather a big rainstorm. And most folks, especially across the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, don't want to hear that because that indicates flooding. And if you guys have known from the past day or so storm we had, when we had a little bit of that rain, your ground is soft. Your ground is saturated, and if we're talking about 2+ inches, it's going to be a problem. And models are showing 2+ inches for that area, and we're going to explain some of the outcomes, the setups, worst case scenarios, and that typical deal. Again, this is about under a week away, so we're going to put the word of potential into perspective rather than something as of we're given to get this. Just so we don't alarm people, but at least we give that potential that, look, if you live along the river or along a creek or an area that's prone to flash flooding of that sort of nature, please watch out. So what you're looking at here is the 500 millibar anomaly, so that middle level of the atmosphere. And the darker colors show your lower pressure, mainly where storms are going to be, or where with that storm where the moisture comes from. Those higher colors, those brighter colors of yellow and green, that's where your high pressures are. That's where you're normally getting some warmer weather or just a high and it's drier. So here's the normal or favorable setup of what we're looking at here. We're basically going to have a front that's going to come through the Midwest by the weekend. You're going to have a high pressure sitting up here. High pressures have that clockwise flow, so here's what's basically happening. You're bringing a flow like this from that high pressure that's sitting up there around Nova Scotia, so you're bringing now moisture in deeper along the Caribbean, and what eventually happens is it has to ramp up someplace or not. Can't move dead north because of that high pressure, so it has to move around the high pressure. So you're going to have one flow around the Atlantic here, and another one that flows then out of the Gulf. And when this front begins to move east, we're thinking that you're going to have a low pressure that's going to catch this and this moisture, and you're going to have a big rain threat in store, and that's where that 2+ inches threat is becoming more and more possible as we head through each day further on and furthermore. Now, we're going to show you a few setups here, scenarios, a better case or a worst case, whichever one you want when it comes to flooding. And we'll show you here that, again, this was the initial setup that I drew up, but that high pressure is going to sit up here around Nova Scotia. It's got that clockwise flow, so you can see the millibars here, or the isobars, are flowing from that southeast to northwest direction here. So you got one flow up in this area, you got another flow coming in the Gulf here. Here's this front, and you got that low pressure right there. Now the concern is that this is going to move eastward. It's going to catch the moisture of the Gulf, catch the moisture of the Atlantic, and there's going to be a low pressure with a lot of precipitation with it. Now, that's not going to be the only rain and the only area that's going to be the rainmaker. There's going to be also another low pressure to the north of this front, and that's going to be the primary low pressure. That one's going to sit up here somewhere. So that one's just going to give rain more to the Ohio Valley and more to the western Mid-Atlantic and western Northeast. This is the problem for the Mid-Atlantic and more of the eastern states of eastern PA, New Jersey, Delaware, and New York. That's your problem, because this one's going to be more south, it's going to be deeper, and as it travels more to the northeast, it's going to pick up a lot of moisture from the Atlantic, a lot of moisture from the Gulf, and it could be a major concern if we're talking about rain, or if you don't want that rain. Flooding from this is that concern. Now, as the storm moves east, this is what it eventually does. You got about 3-prong lows here, but it's more of a front. So I'm giving you the scenario of the front idea. The front basically brings you just about as much as, a few hours of heavy, quick rain would not accumulate too much because it would move very quickly due to it being positioned on a front. So you have all this rain that will come with it here, but pushing eastward very quickly, and there's no real well-defined one individual low pressure, so there's no big problem at all. It just comes through very quickly. The other scenario case, and probably the worst case scenario, is going to be this. And if you know anything about a weather map, you can see that that's a major problem. Why? Because you have one very strong low pressure sitting around here in the mid-Atlantic, and a strong front pulling below it, and a lot of moisture being able to surge across the mid-Atlantic from the southeast, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York. That's a problem for you. So to summarize what I just went through here, you're going to have firstly a high pressure that's going to be sitting up here around Nova Scotia, if you will. Okay, that's going to clockwise these isobars from the Atlantic and from the Gulf. A front's going to then develop over the weekend, push east. We're going to have one low up here, one low down here. This low here is the concern, and as that possibly taps into the Atlantic and Gulf moisture as it moves east, could form its own storm, and that is where, if that does happen, that could be the worst case scenario. And if that were to be the worst case scenario, folks, there would be 2+ inches of rain, and 4 inches certainly wouldn't be out of the question. Now, looking at weather models, we have a few of them that have been coming out. We do have the European model. It's showing a lot of rain. There's the Canadian model showing a lot of rain. The GFS model, it's a very inconsistent model, but it even does show some heavy rain here and there, but it just kind of misses the area. One run keeps to the area the next. But the two that have been very consistent, you need to, when you're forecasting, go with the very consistent model, and that is the one. So, not to alarm anybody, because we are a week away, there is a setup that includes Gulf and Atlantic moisture, and this is why we need to bring to your attention this typical deal of what could very well happen. Now, I do need to also add in there that if the ground was dry, if it wasn't saturated as it was, if we weren't coming off winter, I'd say we could probably do well with 2 inches of rain. But because all the snow melt is melting, because the ground is saturated, 2 inches of rain, okay, forget 6 inches. 2 inches of rain could be a problem alone, especially if it's a very quick falling rain with a hard intensity. So, just to give you guys that update, I will be doing many more as we go through the following days here to just kind of now showing you, the setup. Tomorrow probably showing you more of the models, and as we head toward the weekend, there's going to be some eyes aiming toward analystweathercast.org. I'm forecaster Andrew Fleck. Have a good rest of your day.